So I finally found it. I finally found it. So the people with the last name Early, they're the people who were the orchestrators of that particular county. The Early county belongs to the Early family. That's what I'm seeing right now. And this was just a quick ancestry search, a quick family search, right? This is what I'm seeing. I don't know if this person is a Negro. I don't know. But she has the name Amanda, right? And she has a middle name. To have a middle name, that's an American custom. You see what I'm saying? To be a junior, that's an American custom. Um, there we go. And this is interesting, right? This is interesting. He would essentially, right? He looks, yeah, he has like my exact phenotype, right? My he has my exact phenotype. So this would be a relative. This would be a cousin. Yeah, this would be a cousin. I wish I could connect with them. Yeah, I wish I could connect with them. Um, yeah, that's interesting, man. So yeah, I don't see the purpose of changing last names. If you were, um, you know what I mean. I don't see the purpose. And like again, I gotta stress this. I gotta stress this point that for people who think like you have a last name and it may come from somebody white. Listen, you got to look at the customs of that person. You just can't go off the basis of this person is white or this person is black. You can't go off that custom. The thing you have to go off of is that do they have a middle name? Um, do they look, swarthy as to the point you can find, your black relatives through them, right? So you can see like where did that actually occur as far as the mixing, right? Was this something that another country had done and it's typically not that. I think the people who you see in America, right? Because we look at Europeans as some being like somehow foreign and we don't look at them as being our relatives. Um, like you see this lady right here. She probably has somewhere in her direct lineal, right? She probably has like a black father. I wouldn't be surprised, or a black mother. You know what I mean? Like she essentially her middle name is Louise, so she's essentially a Haitian, right? Like it's current like the current pope. The way he looks, right? He has ties to that republic. So you think like how does a people look distinctively different than what you know, right? All you know is black. That's all you know, right? You just know African Americans. But you see a people who live alongside you. They don't necessarily cohabitate with you up until the point that you two may accept, or you don't know where that line occurs where you all were together, right? But this is what you also see is that when people come to your land and they impregnate the indigene, right? The aborigine, right? They impregnate them, right? And you see that, you know, they leave their seed behind, or they leave their DNA coding behind, right? And you notice that it's not typically always done in a blush. It's typically done in the sense that it's accepted. I don't think people were running through villages, impregnating women and telling the women that they have to raise the child, and same for the men, right? I don't think that's how the world works. And people, they ultimately give that type of idea that it works that way without really knowing that uh plagues may have happened, right, which have been the occurrence of certain leopard diseases taking um faddish, so like you see how these people live, right? um you see what I mean? He's a captain and his last name is Early. You see what I mean? So he's in an area where you would look right, and you would see that he has the life that says that this is pre-America, right? Or I shouldn't even say pre-America, right? It's re-America. You know what I mean? Like he's in the stage of re-America. This is not even pre-America, because like these are like wooden cabins. So this is like 1910, 1912 sometime. Um, okay, that says 1913. Because if you say pre-America, that means you're talking about 1609 type. You know what I mean? And you see an entirely different, you know, state of being. So again, these essentially these would be, because I have a great auntie whose name is this, right? Um, so like you see, right? These could be descendants of Haitians. You see what I'm saying? Like you have a French middle name, like even having a middle name, right? That lets me know you have an American DNA in you, you know. But like we need to find out more about who people are. You know what I mean? We need to find out more about who people are. I don't I see the divide between blacks and whites, but a lot of people are afraid to speak on it. For whatever reason, I don't know. I don't know. Um, yeah, I really don't know. But um, again, I look at it like this, you know, these names, I don't see them in Europe. You know what I mean? So people shouldn't be saying, are we some type of, see, here goes a black family who has the last name early. But I don't think people should be saying, like, are we generic Africans? People should be saying, are we generic Europeans? That's what people should be saying. You know what I mean? Like, are we generic Europeans? And that's based off the cuz we don't essentially have last names like Umawale. We have last names that are English. Some of us, right? And some of us has last names that are French, so on and so forth. Like if you have a name like Pierre, that's French. Um, so like yeah, you know, this name right here, right? You know, this is completely different than Luis. But you see that the names, they had a start, you know what I mean? Which means whoever grafted this English language, right? Whatever society grafted this English language, they made it to where like, the words would stick together. Like a name like Carlita Early, that completely goes with the ambiance you see in this picture. It completely goes with it. Um Yeah, but like, that's kind of different too when you think about it. Like a name like Luis Early, that's kind of different. That's kind of different. That lets me also know that Early is French. Cause like I don't really know people with the last name Luis. But I know that's a black name, but it never crossed my path. Um, you see Lawrence, and that's French. You see Lawrence. Um, you know, so again, people they have to look like, okay, these people, right? These are our relatives. You see what I mean? These are our relatives. Um, so when you see you have relatives who may have European origin as well, you should look at how you're so closely related to Africans, because Africans and Americans, they share the same tint and hue. So you gotta find out what common ancestors in America are still alive who have these names. Cause like I see people with these names all the time. Like, they have like names like Omawale last name, and it'll be a name that their parents gave them, right? And you be wondering like, how did they get this name? Was their parents in like a Black Panther chapter at one point in time in the '60s? But you just never know. but the only thing you see is that, those are ancient families from America. That's the only thing that you notice, and that they know something. That's that's what I would want to know, like how are families so connected between there. But a lot of people don't want to say it. I'm speaking as a person who is a Hebraic origin, right? East Africa, right? East Africa in a theme that it's accepted in Georgia, the eastern part of Africa of Georgia, right? Where people had confines of traveling to other places where they usually had traveled to. Because all families who are from a particular origin, they don't always stick together, but they know of each other. You know what I mean? Like, I will be closely related to an African just as much as I'm closely related to an American. Um, you know, like, this is interesting, man. Um, you know, this is interesting. And like to have a burial site as well too. That's another thing you should look at, like having a burial site, right? If you have a burial site, that means you're here legally. And I always say this. I say whites are just as aboriginal to America as other groups of people are. Same can be said for Asians, same can be said for Siberians. It's the same thing. Now, when a person leaves and start their own nation in another part of the world, right? How you see, people who may go to other places, and you'll think like it's people here in America who look like them, but you know, they, you know, their loyalty at one point. The people who warred, right? If you had a war in America, right, and you lost the war, another country helped you set up another country some part else in the world. That don't mean that you're not from America. It just means you lost the war and you had to set up another state in another part of the world. That's all it means. So you have the 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 you have the invention of the levees, like to create water paths, you know what I mean? Like to separate families. Again, this stuff is pretty neat, and I think the more people think about it and they get information and they hear it, the most important part is that you listen to other people speak, right? You learn from other people's experiences. When you start to figure that out, right, you're going to notice like you're going to be like 27 learning this information, and you're going to be far ahead of people who is like in their 40s and 50s as to knowing this information. You're going to be far ahead. Like I didn't know any of this stuff until I started thinking, but after I started listening. And then when I saw like people want looking at how letterology, right? That's a word that I made on my own. Like people want, I never heard a person say letterology. Like people, you'll hear people say like petroglyphs, but they won't say hieroglyphs. Like they won't tell you the secret meaning behind letters and pictures. But once you figure that out and you start to create your own words, you're going to start to look at things differently. You're going to be like, okay, I get this, I get that, I get this. And then you'll just all figure it out from there. You'll figure it out all from there. Like, I didn't even know I was going to say that part about the levees, but then I thought about it and I said, yep, that makes sense. So, and again, remember in the last video, Haney's, right, in Savannah, Georgia? Well, here goes that last name, Hayes. So like you keep seeing variations of this word Hayes and Haney's. When you see people who have this last name, the first thing you're gonna think is that okay, this person has to have Omotic origin. Doesn't matter how they look, just the fact they have that bloodline in them, that last name. They have Omotic origin because you do, right? And the fact that your last name and their last names together, it's clear. It's clear as day. So all I have to do now is look at the fact of how modern man and East African sort of, what was their relationship in the start of some of these nations, you know, because if you if you're Ethiopian, you come from Ugandans. You know, it's no way of getting around it. You know, if you're Sudanese, you come from Ugandans. It's no way of getting around it. It's no way of getting around it. So I need to figure out the history of Uganda. That's pretty much what I'm going to do next. Great peace, Yakoki.